Hello everyone, and welcome to our session to talk about the Open Mainframe Project and the zopen community. The Open Mainframe Project was started in 2015 as an initiative to help bring open source onto the mainframe. It's part of the Linux Foundation. And while open source actually has its roots in the mainframe and has had for almost 60 years, the Open Mainframe Project is, if you will, the next evolution of open source and bringing that over to the mainframe community. One of the challenges that we face on the mainframe is how do we grow and sustain open source? And so the answer to that question is right here on the slide. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll let you read it. But it's essentially bringing those new tools, those new skill sets, the current skill sets that the younger generation really are familiar with over to the mainframe and getting those integrated in. And that's really kind of what the heart of the Open Mainframe Project is. One of the things that we're trying to do is to redefine the developer experience, right? So those open tools, DevOps, things like that. With that, that's where Zoe comes into play, Cobalt, Check, Glossa, those types of projects are all bringing those new skill sets to the table on the mainframe. Recently, we've had two new projects join. We've got Zorse, which is targeting towards the large language models and gathering up the data necessary to be able to leverage those large language models. And then the zopen community. And I'm very fortunate to have with me today Igor Todorovski. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Igor Todorovski, you're right.
Who's going to talk to us a little bit about the zopen community and what that brings to the Open Mainframe Project and to the mainframe in general. So welcome, Igor.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited to be part of the Open Mainframe Project.
Absolutely. So can you describe for me the zopen community and how it aligns with the Open Mainframe Project's kind of theme?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get started and talk about the zopen community, I just want to talk about the origin of how we came to be. So it all started when I actually started my career about 17 years ago working on ZOS. So I originally worked on compilers and then I switched over to work on porting interpreters to ZOS. So these are open source based interpreters, starting with Node.js runtime. So at that time, the Node.js runtime had a number of components that it depended on. Some of those included file systems like NewMake, Ninja, CMake. It also had dependencies on other components like OpenSSL. So before we could actually work on porting the Node.js runtime itself, we had to get this foundation, this backbone in place before we could work on porting Node.js. So at that time, we also had another team working on a Python port for ZOS, and they had similar struggles. So they were in the process of also porting OpenSSL. So one of the things that we noticed was that we were duplicating a lot of work. We were working in our individual silos, doing pretty much the same thing. So at that point, I met up with Mike Fulton, and we said, there's a lot of wasted effort here. We're duplicating work. Why not create an open source community where we could all contribute to one place and then leverage, from a common open source repository. So that's where the it was originally known as the ZOS Open Tools Community. We actually just renamed it to the zopen community as of about a month ago. So the whole intention behind the zopen community was to make it a completely open source community. So not only IBMers would be driving this, but everyone from our global community and within Tech Exchange. So I think that's one of the reasons why this really fits well with the Open Mainframe Project. So one of the things with zopen community is that it's so completely open source. Everything from the source code to the packages, discussions, everything is completely available on the zopen community organization. So yeah, right now we have 200 plus tools we started this about a couple of years ago. So we started with the foundation, getting the build systems in place, and now we're able to port over 200 plus tools. So we're super excited to be part of the Open Mainframe project. We also have a package manager that we've created from scratch to be able to allow developers to efficiently consume these tools. We also have a build framework that allows you to easily get started in the porting process. So we're trying to create a whole ecosystem here, and we're super excited to be part of the Open Mainframe project.
That's great. So what kind of challenges did you face with the community prior to joining the Open Mainframe project that you're hoping are going to be solved by being part of Open Mainframe project?
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed early on is that a lot of efforts that got into porting were done in these closed source proprietary ways. So one of the issues with that is that the ports can quickly become stagnant if you don't have a large enough team to help maintain them. So if you don't have a team to continually maintain and update each of these tools, then they're quickly going to become obsolete. So one of the things that we want to do is make this open source, raise awareness, and get people contributing so that we can keep current. And so far, we've had actually one contributor come in and deliver a really awesome feature, which is to check for the latest updates to each of these tools. He actually implemented a GitHub action, which is an automatic trigger. And essentially, if there's an update to a particular tool, let's say Git gets updated to 2.47, it will automatically, the GitHub action will automatically pull that in, and then we'll begin the whole process of testing. And if everything is successful, we'll get a new release of Git automatically created. So maintenance reduces as a result of that, and that's thanks to the contributions from the community.
That's great. I know I've done a little bit of research, and I know the package manager was a big deal, right? You mentioned it a minute ago. Can you talk a little bit more about the package manager and kind of the evolution of that, and where you're hoping people are going to find value in that?
Yeah. So the package manager was initially created because one of the bottlenecks that we noticed for ZOS developers is that typically when you want to get a piece of software installed on ZOS, you need to go through a system administrator, and sometimes that can take up to 2 to 3 weeks. And the reason for that is that they need to order this SMP, and then once the order is completed, then they can go ahead and install it. Sometimes that can take about 2 to 3 weeks. And this can impede developers, especially if they need some software in order to overcome an obstacle. So the reason for inventing the package manager is to be able to enable developers to be able to install into any location. So we put in a lot of effort so that developers can install these tools using the zopen package manager into their home directories if they need to, or into a shared location. So it's all about enabling developer efficiency and unburdening them because of the current process that's in place for SMP installs. Not to say that SMP installs are, not a good thing for the ecosystem. They're still important. IBM still uses them, and it's a way for tracking and auditing. But we also want to have another mechanism to enable developers to continue to be productive.
Have you all paid any attention to some of the other projects and some of the things that they've done, say like the Zoe project? I know that one of the big things that just came out with Zoe v3 was the change to profiles and how that was done. And do you learn any lessons from kind of observing what's happening in some of the other projects as well?
Yeah, so we haven't worked that closely with Zoe. I know Zoe has a couple of products or software that they use or depend on from our community, including OpenSSL. But in terms of leveraging from other open source communities, we do actually interact with many of the open source communities that essentially our tools are originated from. So one of the things that we do quite often is we upstream our changes back to the open source community. So let's say we made modifications to one of our tools like Vim. We need to make these modifications in order to enable that particular tool to work on ZOS, to build to pass all the test cases and to function on ZOS. We then need to, so the next step for us is usually to contribute those changes back. And the reason we do that is because we want to reduce the maintenance effort from our end. If we just keep those patches in our forked repositories, then we need to continually maintain them, because if there's a change that's coming from upstream and somehow it conflicts with our changes, we need to update it. But if we upstream our changes back to the original communities, then they can help us maintain those changes. So each community is vastly different. They have their own processes, and usually we have to adapt to those processes. One of the next steps that we're looking at right now is many of these communities have a CI/CD pipeline in place, and it's typically running regression testing on other platforms like Windows, Mac, and Linux. The next step for us, in order to make ZOS a first-class platform, is to integrate a ZOS public-facing system so that we can do CI/CD testing on these open source communities directly on ZOS.
Great. So what about your adoption rates, right? So zopen is new to the Open Mainframe project, but it's not new in general. It's been around for a while, as you said earlier. What have you seen from an adoption rate perspective, and how are you hoping that might change now that you're part of the Open Mainframe project?
Yeah, so we started this initiative in 2022, and at that point, it was really more about contributing these changes to an open source organization. And at that point, we kind of grew organically. We had a couple of users, and over time, it's grown through word of mouth. And right now, we have a fairly solid user base, but we're looking to take the zopen community to the next level now that we're part of the Open Mainframe project. So being a part of the Open Mainframe project, I know there's press releases, and being even a part of this tech exchange of the Mainframe Summit, I think will help spread adoption and awareness of the zopen community. So we're super excited to be talking about the zopen community in front of everyone, and we're looking for more feedback, right? So feedback is going to drive growth and progress in the zopen community. So that's what we're looking for the next step, and then after that, we're hoping to be hopefully a part of the mentorship program that the Open Mainframe project is currently leveraging for many of its projects. We have had a couple of contributors come in through universities. We've been fortunate enough to be part of a couple of universities programs like RPI University with its ARCOS program, and also Georgia Tech. They had an internship this year, which was really successful, and we did get a lot of contributions. But we are looking for more and more contributors, because as our portfolio expands, we currently have 200 plus tools. We'll need more support to continue to maintain it and upkeep it.
So this event here, Tech Exchange, has got obviously a huge audience this week, and I know that I'm trying to get my slides in advance, it's not working. I know that we announced the zopen as part of Open Mainframe projects at the beginning of the week, and it was mentioned in the keynote for Community Day for Open Mainframe project. Have you seen any excitement building over the course of this week? Like, people, really interested and wanting to maybe get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Even after one of my sessions, so we actually had a session on how to contribute using the V8 JavaScript engine as an example. This was a session held by both John Davis and I. And after that session, we did get a couple of individuals come up to us mentioning that, oh, I've actually ported this particular tool. One example is Midnight Commander a couple of years ago. And Midnight Commander, this person had ported it, but he didn't even know about the zopen community. Luckily, Midnight Commander is not part of our portfolio, so I told him this is a great opportunity for you to get involved and contribute it. So that's just one example, and then we've had other folks talk about other ways in which they can contribute. Whether it's through feedback, through just trying out our tools, even updating our documentation to reflect the current state of our package manager and our tools. So there's a lot of ways that folks can contribute. Another way is just contributing to the package manager. Our package manager has evolved in the last 2 years. from just this pet project in order for us to actually test and install these tools. But now we have a lot of users who are using it, and they have quite a bit of feedback. Lionel is actually one of them. He's not here today, but he was in one of the sessions, and he constantly provides us with lots of feedback. And yeah, so we're super excited about more contributors coming out of this tech exchange.
So I know you had a session about the V8, like you mentioned just earlier, and I'm curious, can you talk about what that is a little bit more? I heard someone jokingly say, what is it? Is it a vitamin drink? And I know that you're talking about a V8 engine, right? Versus, a vitamin drink, but I thought that was kind of comical. And so maybe you could talk a little bit more about what V8 really is and how it got its name and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the V8 engine, it's actually a JavaScript engine. It's what really powers the Node.js runtime. So if you've ever used Node.js, it's actually, the code gen is all being handled through V8. And in addition to that, if you've ever used the browser Chrome, it also uses the V8 JavaScript engine to do its JavaScript rendering. So the V8 engine was initially ported as part of the Node.js runtime. And John Davis, he's part of Broadcom. His company also leverages that same V8 engine. So the whole idea here was to have one single source of truth, one common location where the V8 engine would be contributed to and leveraged by multiple products and teams. So the whole idea was to put it in the zopen community and get it working and building to the point where users can leverage it. Yeah, so the V8 engine was just one example of how our entire build framework works. So we have 200 plus tools. We have this common build framework that enables users to be able to have a common structure in order to be able to build these tools. So that's actually one of the ways in which we reduce our maintenance effort. We have this common pipeline that allows us to build these tools in an automatic fashion.
Awesome. So what are you most excited about on the horizon for zopen? Like, what excites you the most coming up in the future?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really excited about is just taking zopen to the next level with the Open Mainframe project, participating in the mentorship program, so we're really excited about that, and just raising overall adoption on zopen, getting more feedback from the community. But yeah, and specifically with respect to zopen, we have a lot of features that we're currently working on. One of the issues with the zopen package manager is that a lot of existing companies and vendors don't necessarily have access to github.com. This is something that we're trying to change, but it's the reality of ZOS and companies that use ZOS. So we're trying to facilitate them by providing a mechanism in which they can have a local mirror of our packages, or perhaps mirror into a trusted domain, whether it's coming from the Open Mainframe project or through a trusted vendor. So that's one thing that we're working on, so that we can unbottleneck these users who cannot necessarily get access to our tools, but hopefully with this feature they will be able to. So other than that, we have a lot of tools that are on the horizon, from security to AI-focused tools, and we can talk more specifically about that. Or
yeah. So I know a lot of organizations, one of the big struggles that folks are having nowadays, and that Open Mainframe Project is helping to address is security issues and things like that organizations have, the fear that they have of open source, right? Especially if you're in the financial industry and that that type of arena. So how do you think that the zopen community and your processes and all of that are going to potentially help that situation?
Yeah, so there's a lot of aspects in which we can handle that. One is, and I think this being part of the Open Mainframe project will help in this. So the Linux Foundation has something called the Open Source Security Foundation Guidelines. So one of the things that we had to do in order to be onboarded to the Open Mainframe project is to make sure we get that badge. So that involves incorporating things like vulnerability scanning, static scanning of our source code changes to make sure that there's no potential weaknesses in the source that we're contributing. So those are all things that I think will help improve the security of our portfolio. So the other thing that we added recently, and this actually came from a contribution from one of the university students from Georgia Tech, was the ability to audit your installed tools. So what it does is it checks for vulnerabilities in the installed tools on your ZOS file system. And we actually query a open source database that tells you, for this specific tool in this version, there's an associated vulnerability. So we're leveraging that. And on top of that, we have a set of tools in the zopen community that help with security. Everything from GPG for signing and verifying images to sudo for escalating privileges in a more finer grain controlled manner, to OpenSSL. And one thing that we're actually looking at in the future is incorporating fuzz testing, which so there's many examples of that, including OnFuzz and a few others. But the way it works is that you give this particular fuzz testing tool a set of inputs that will work with your particular tool, and then it mutates them in various ways in order to break your program. So the thought here is that we would run such fuzz testing tools on all of our ZOS applications to find potential vulnerabilities in them, before they get exposed to the public.
Awesome. So you've mentioned the Open Mainframe Project's mentorship program a couple of times, and I know that that's been very successful over the past couple of years, and particularly this year we had great success with that. How does someone, what would someone expect if they were to become a mentor or a mentee within the Open community?
So typically when we look for contributors from universities, anything we would have to follow the same protocol here, is we're looking for developers with C and C++, as well as GoScale. A lot of our tools and applications are written in C and C++, so that's really important. However, as the open source community continues to modernize, they're adopting newer languages like Go. Rust is another language that's being adopted. Unfortunately, Rust is not available on ZOS as of yet. There's efforts to make Rust available on ZOS. Hopefully, sometime soon it will be. So those are really the key languages that we're looking for. But typically, when a new contributor gets involved, they can work with us to get started. We do have documentation on how to actually get started with porting to ZOS. But they can get involved in a variety of ways. So one is by porting a new tool to ZOS, another is by improving the quality of an existing tool. The third is by adjusting and updating our documentation. Just by reading our documentation and going through the steps, it will help validate that everything is up to date. But yeah, there's many ways in which to get involved. The package manager is another example. So we're looking for updates on that. We have a number of issues that we need to address.
So how, outside of the mentorship program, how else can contributors get involved? So what's the easiest path for someone to get involved in the zopen community?
So I would say if you have access to a ZOS system, just try it out. So follow our documentation, try out our package manager, install some of the tools, play with them. If you find any issues, really that's the best way for you to get involved initially. So we typically ask users to try out our tools, get familiar with them, and then once they do, then you can take it to the next step and look at how you can contribute, how you can make the zopen community better. If you don't necessarily have access to a ZOS system, we are working on trying to get a ZOS public-facing system available. So that should be announced fairly shortly. We do actually have a sign-up page, which I guess I could provide if we make this public afterwards. So we do have a sign-up page if you don't have access to a ZOS system, and you can get involved that way. We have a couple of channels in which you can get involved. So we have our github.com/zopen community organization. If you're interested in communicating with us in real time, we are on the System Z Enthusiast Discord. So we have a couple of channels in that Discord, zopen community and zopen community dev.
Great, and I know that the Open Mainframe Project is also working on getting a Z15 to be available to the community as well, and that's looking like it'll be available sometime after the first of the year. And so that'll be an opportunity for folks as well.
Absolutely.
Great. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Any last words, Igor?
No, just I'm super proud to be a part of the Open Mainframe project, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you.